Apparently, if you want to see some really weird stuff, just head on over to Ohio. The strange urban legends, the cryptid and UFO sightings and hauntings that have come out of this state are abundant. So let's dive right in, shall we? We're going to start off the list with a recent UFO sighting in Middletown. So in June of 2023, a number of residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky over town. The lights were in a circular formation, rotating. A man named Caden Little managed to capture the weird lights on video. We see them hovering in place, rotating in a counterclockwise direction before flying off at such an amazing speed that if you blink, it just looks like they vanish completely. President of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society, Brian Simpson, looked at the footage, saying that the lights definitely weren't from a drone based on the speed at which they flew out of sight. I think this is a pretty cool piece of footage, but what do you guys think? Genuine? Hoax? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. And while you're at it, why not hit that subscribe button as well? Here's a creepy piece of footage from TikTok. A couple was hiking at night in Ohio when they pulled out their camera to film this pair of eyes peeking out at them from the tree line. At first, they thought it was a deer, but at one point they realized really doesn't seem to be a deer. Something about the way the eyes are moving and the fact that deers rarely decide to follow people. I really want nothing to do with human beings. So it becomes pretty clear that there's something else tailing them. Now, we never get to see the creature in full. It lurks in the shadows the entire time, but some commenters have said it kind of moves like a big cat. Others have commented it could be the Ohio grassman or dogman. Whether this was a cryptid or a predatory animal, either would be terrifying. Eventually, the couple wisely decides to hurry out of there. The small village of Sabina once had something of a mascot, a very macabre mascot. It was a mummy. So in 1929, an African-American man in his mid to late 40s was found dead on a road near Sabina. No ID, just $1.40 in cash and a scrap of paper with an address that turned out to be a vacant lot in Cincinnati. The authorities had no idea who this guy was, so they went with the name Eugene. Eugene the Mummy was taken to Sabina's Littleton funeral home and embalmed. They put him in a brick shed by a bus stop, thinking maybe someone would recognize him during the 30-day viewing period, but no luck. Folks in Sabina got kind of attached to their new resident though. They cleaned him up, they changed his clothes. Things got really weird though when local kids started playing with him and moving him around, even swiping his gold teeth. Teenagers would even take the poor guy out on joyrides. The mummy ended up being taken to Ohio State University and was placed on a bench outside the school to scare students. The Littleton funeral home got wind of this and Eugene was sent back to Sabina, and at this point it was clear the guy needed to be buried. Eugene got a plot in the local cemetery, complete with a stone that says he was found dead in 1929, buried 1964. His identity is still a complete mystery. Next up, we have the case of the Peninsula Python. I think this is one of my favorite stories to come out of Ohio. It's not often that a massive-sized wild python ends up roaming through a middle American state, but in one magical summer in Ohio, that's exactly what happened. In the summer of 1944, something strange happened in Summit County, Ohio, near the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. People started reporting sightings of a massive python about 15 feet long and incredibly thick. Now, at first, authorities didn't take these reports seriously, thinking it might be a hoax or some kind of wild exaggeration. As it turned out, though, what could have gone down as just another one of Ohio's many urban legends turned out to actually be very real. The residents were not making it up. Somehow a large python was let loose. No one could explain how the snake ended up in Ohio, but there it was. During that summer, the residents were terrified as the enormous snake roamed through farms, leaving behind indentations the size of giant tires. To make matters worse, the python even attacked livestock. Of course it did, right? Authorities spent the whole summer hunting this thing down, but it was never found. It just disappeared eventually. Most likely it died from exposure during the harsh Ohio winter. Next up is the Crosswick Monster case. This was a very well-documented case at the time, and is one of the strangest stories ever to come out of the state of Ohio. Just saying a lot. So in 1882, two boys, Ed and Joe Lynch, had a really terrifying encounter with a strange creature in a field. They heard strange noises from tall grass, and before they could react, they said they saw this large lizard-like beast with 4 legs come out of them. The creature approached the two, grabbed Ed in its jaws, and started dragging him towards a hollowed-out tree. Ed's screams ended up catching the attention of nearby men who rushed over to help. They managed to rescue Ed, but he was injured. After the incident, 60 men armed themselves with axes and clubs, and they formed a posse to hunt down this thing. They caught up with it, and the creature then stood on its hind legs. The chase led them to a hill of rocks where the creature escaped into a hole, never to be seen again. The local newspaper reported the story at the time, and it's since become a staple of Ohio's folklore. And I could see why. I mean, a lot of folks saw this thing that day. The exact nature of the creature, still a total mystery. So yeah, I don't know. I just love that story. Anytime there's like multiple people who see something, that just it makes it far more interesting for me. Next is another UFO case. This is the Trumbull County incident. This was a series of events where numerous residents reported seeing these unusual lights in the sky. Even police officers reported seeing things. Multiple residents reported sightings of odd lights in the night sky, describing them as bright and unusual aerial activities. Officer Toby Maloro was on duty that night. He was dispatched to investigate reported lights, and he was driving closer and closer to the source of these lights, keeping contact with the dispatcher, describing what he saw in real time. And at one point, radio communication was suddenly cut off, and his vehicle stopped. Maloro then became engulfed in a bright light from above. He got out of his vehicle for some reason to get a better view and reported seeing this massive circular object hovering in the sky. One of the strangest parts about his description of these events is that even though this thing was massive, it was almost completely silent. After a period of time, the object began to move away, and just as the craft moved off, his car and radio started working again. It's a pretty fascinating case, not just because of the detailed account made by Officer Malero, but all the corroborating reports from other residents as well. Now, a corroborated UFO case is one thing, but mass amounts of people frantically phoning into the police claiming to witness a large mutated octopus man, that is a whole other story. Very wild case right here. So the Octoman case, this unfolded on the 29th of January, 1959 in Cincinnati. It was a series of reports to the local cops about a bizarre octopus-like creature. The first report came from a man who urgently contacted police. He had a hard time describing what he was seeing because no one's ever seen a mutated octopus man before. And then a truck driver phoned up saying he'd encountered an unusual creature while driving into Cincinnati. Reports then just kept flooding in. The common thread with these calls is that people apparently sounded genuinely distressed. The creature was described as very large and had grayish skin, tentacle-like appendages, and a lopsided chest. Not sure exactly what that means, but I don't know, just maybe kind of like hunchback kind of. One witness provided a more detailed account, stating it was large, not a dog or a cat. It leaped in front of my car on 2 legs and was taller than the auto. When I looked back in my mirror, it was moving along the bridge rail. It was 3 or 4 times the size of a man and much bulkier. I have an eye and mind for dimensions, and I know it was huge. If I ever had the opportunity to go back in time, like forget going to Woodstock or anything like that, I'd just be like, take me to Cincinnati, Ohio, January 29th, 1959. I just want to know what everyone saw that night. Like, was it just a guy with a horrible deformity? Was there just something weird in the air that night? Or was there a freaking octopus creature roaming around that bridge? I desperately want to know. The Cedar Bog Monster. So the Cedar Bog Monster is just one of Ohio's many variations of Bigfoot. Back in the 50s, people started spreading stories about a creature hanging out in the Cedar Bog Nature Preserve. It was described as a large, hairy figure standing around 7 feet tall, with eyes that shined in the dark, and a not-so-pleasant odor. One of the most famous sightings was from a couple who had parked near the bog they spotted the huge hairy creature strolling along Woodburn Road, which runs right beside the bog. They hightailed it out of there, of course, and reported the incident to the police. And there would be more and more accounts being reported. People started saying they were hearing strange noises in the woods, like grunts and howls. Some would find massive-sized footprints. Local news even featured the Cedar Bog Monster in a headline. Now, what I wonder is, if this thing really did exist, is it a different creature than the Grassman and Orange Eyes and like all these other big hairy creatures roaming around Ohio? Or are these folks seeing the same creature or species of creature? These are the important questions you have to ask yourself. Another one of Ohio's strangest cases is the Werewolf of Defiance sightings. So in the summer of 1972, on the Norfolk and Western Railway in Defiance, two railroad workers, Ted Davis and Tom Jones, experienced a bizarre and unsettling event that would later be dubbed the Werewolf of Defiance case. It all began with Ted Davis, who, while working away on the railroad, saw something otherworldly. He reported seeing a large, wolf-like creature. The creature actually held a wooden board in its paws, and without warning, it swung the board, striking Ted squarely on the shoulder. The creature then hastily retreated into the bushes like a coward. 5 days later, Ted and his coworker, Tom Jones, returned to the railway for another day of work. For some reason, they didn't quit after that first encounter. Sure enough, the creature shows up again, and this time it was actually a safe distance away from the two, and Ted and Tom then reported their encounters to the local police. Little did they know that their report was just the beginning of a wave of Wolfman sightings in the area. Other reports started flooding in, each detailing sightings of this menacing wolf monster, but reports started to trickle out by the end of that summer. So, did people hear about that first report and just want attention? Was the whole thing a big hoax? Once again, I'd really love to go back in time and just hide by that railway to watch the whole thing play out. Finally, we have the case of the Minerva Monster. Back in 1978, folks in Minerva started talking about a hairy creature running around in the woods. A big, hairy, unknown beast. People claimed it was about 7 feet tall, had reddish-brown hair, and looked like a giant ape. Yes, another giant ape in Ohio. There are many. It all started when the Caton family saw this monster near a gravel pit outside their house, and they saw it on more than one occasion. One night they saw it peering at them through their window. It would also hurl rocks at their home. A real awful creature. It scared the living daylights out of them. Of course, they even said it smelled bad, like a mix of skunk and a wet dog. Not exactly a pleasant combo. Authorities were contacted and they came to investigate, but all that was left behind were large footprints around the family's property, leading back into the woods. A number of other residents also made reports about a similar creature around the same time, including the Caton's neighbor. It's still a complete mystery, though, as to what this thing was. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.